So Robert, since the show is all about you, our culture is going to be great honors for our audience to have you to share a little bit about yourself for them. So would you please tell us who you are and a little bit about the works that you do? Can you do that?
Sure, happy to. I would say right now at this point in time, I'm a partner at Execom. We're a communication skills training consultancy. So we do training at big companies across all what you might think of as professional or soft skills like presentations, negotiations, business development, influencing skills. So that's what I do for most of my day job. In addition, I also lecture at the Wharton School for their executive and full-time MBA on communication, leadership communication, managerial communication, and topics like that as well.
Uh, you you share yourself too little that it's too short, so we need to examine it and about that a lot deeper in the conversation today. Okay, Robert?
Happy to. Happy to.
All
You
right.
know, one thing you learn in communication is to be concise. But I'm happy for you to pull out what you think might be interesting threads to go down.
Concise is good, but storytelling is also part of the of communications, right? So we want to
It
hear
is true.
stories. So and part of the show that we are doing is to bring great stories for the people
Yeah.
to reflect, think, and apply things that they can use for their lives, right? So
Yes.
allow us to bring you all the way back to when you were young. And
Yeah.
when I was young, I thought I wanted to become an astronaut, so I want to wear astronaut suit
Mm.
and jump in different planet. Life didn't give me a little chance to get there. All
I
right.
don't know. You might have a good chance these
Yeah,
days. I feel
yeah.
like there's so many private space companies.
I was able to bought some sticker, so from the NASA. So
Mm.
that's good. So Robert, when you was young, what did you dream about the future and what did you think that you're gonna do in the future, Robert?
You know, it's a funny question because I will say, I guess depending on which part of my youth
Yeah.
we're thinking about, but I would say, one of the paths I thought I would take, and it's kind of what I ended up studying in my undergrad, right, was chemistry,
Ah,
because all throughout my life I was, into science. I did a lot of research, in high school and college, and was good at it, and thought, oh, I'm going to be a scientist. That's going to be the path that I would take. And I would say that, you think that, and then right when I was about to graduate, most of my classmates were going into finance, so I ended up just switching into finance. And all of that to say, I probably could have given more thought to what I could do or should do, but it was almost based on just what I was doing in the moment. But I will tell you a funny story.
ah,
Now you kind of mentioned storytelling. Throughout my younger age, even though I did well in school, my teachers always had one complaint. I'll tell you what the complaint is. The complaint was that I talk too much. I was always talking to my friends. I was always talking to all these other people. And so every year, my mom would complain, it's like, "All right, you do well in school. You just have to shut up, And I will tell you, it kind of led me now to my profession today, where I talk, for most of my living. So it's one of these things that you don't think about until you really reflect back. And there are many signs, I think, that point to what we're probably meant to be doing early in our childhood. And I think that's one of the things I'm a deep believer in, is that I think we're all meant to do something.
mm,
And part of life is to figure out what that is and to
mm,
to do that thing. So, and I'll tell
absolutely.
you more about how I got into this role. But I'll pause there to see if there were any questions or comments.
I, I thanks for sharing that the part of life is for us to figure out, our journey, right? And the dots only can be connected backward, not connected forward. So, when we connected the dots backward, we see how beautiful life is to us, right? So
Yeah.
tell us from the graduation as a scientist in the chemical industry, moving to the finance sector, how that journey leads you from there to now, what you do.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I'm happy to talk about it because I think I probably learned one of my most important life lessons in that journey. So, when I graduated, again, most of my peers were getting into finance. So, I had no experience in finance. So I would interview, and I'll tell you, most of the interviews, I didn't get the job because they would say you showed no interest in finance for the last 4 years. And so I was like, well, you have to start somewhere, right? And I wasn't a really good interviewer at the time, or interviewee at the time. But then I had one company that was interested in giving me a shot. It was a boutique equities trading firm, and basically they're like, all right, we're willing to take a shot at on you. So I just got into the company, got all my licenses, and just started doing the work. And basically, as a prop trader, you're given a pool of money, and you're going to make money for the organization trading stocks. And I did pretty well, just kind of learning from the more senior traders. And I probably did that for about 5.5, 6 years. And the only reason I left, one was it wasn't, at least in my mind, for my personality, I think a sustainable job. Right, you have very high highs when you have a very good day, and you have very low lows. So I felt like the emotional swings were a bit too much for me. And then two, I also felt it was a very isolating job, because you're really just kind of on your own trading. Like you had colleagues, but you weren't really needing to work with anyone. So, there were some good things around kind of pattern recognition, decision making, and dealing with pressure, but it wasn't something I wanted long term. So then I kind of got my next job working in China, because the next thing was, hey, doing business in China. That was like the hot thing, right? And this was probably around 2008. The Olympics was in China. So I decided, you know what? Got an opportunity through my network to work out there in a more kind of general business management role in a factory manufacturing company, and learned about doing business there. And then I decided to come back to the U.S. because my girlfriend at the time, wife now, she didn't want to move to China. So I think if we wanted to stay together, I better move back. So then I decided to move back, but there wasn't really any manufacturing kind of in the U.S. And at the same time, what I learned about my experience in manufacturing is that I didn't want to be in manufacturing. It was pretty grueling. And maybe it could have been the work culture in China. What's the downside of being kind of an expat in China is that you have the daytime, right, hours of the Chinese factory. Then you have kind of Europe time, because you can speak English. So you're kind of in those meetings. And then you have the US time, which is the nighttime in China. So I felt like I was working quite a bit. And that also wasn't sustainable. So when I came to the US, back to the US, I had this wonderful opportunity to kind of figure out just what I wanted to do. And I guess in some ways I didn't know. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do. I could go back to trading. I could try to find something in manufacturing. And I stumbled upon a book on how do you find your passion in life. And I've always thought that was an important thing to do, because every biography I read of people who did great things pointed to them following their passion. So I read the book. The book was The Pathfinder by Nicholas Lohr. And I think I stumbled upon it because I was looking at some career coaching training, and it pointed towards that book. At the time, I think a workshop was like $7,000-8,000. Something in my mind seemed insanely expensive for like something I didn't know what it was. So I said, let me read the book. And I'll tell you, that book probably changed the trajectory of my entire professional career, because up until then, I've made all of my decisions based on external factors, right? What was like seemingly to give status, what would make money, what was available. And the premise of the book was really, you should look at yourself first and figure out who you are and find work that fits you, as opposed to trying to fit yourself to the job. And that was the life lesson I was alluding to before I went into this bit of a rambling story, that looking at who you are and finding jobs that fit you really began to help me, I think, become successful more quickly, because I could just be myself and played to my strengths, and I was being rewarded right in the roles I was in, and everything pointed towards kind of some type of teaching, coaching, counseling role,
Mm,
right? If I, a lot of it was like self-reflection. What did you like to do as a kid? What did you find yourself doing in every one of your jobs? And in
mm,
every one of those jobs, even though it wasn't my function, I would play some type of teaching role or some type of coaching role for like new employees, even though I wasn't asked to do it.
mm.
So then I repurposed my resume, got a job at a health insurance company doing sales coaching and training, did really well there. And then one of my good friends, he was kind of at a big professional services firm. And he said, "Oh, Robert, I know you're into this training stuff, right? Kind of like I'm sure how you have a lot of friends that say, "Oh, I know you're into insight sharing. I know the perfect person, right, for you to talk to." So it was very similar in that way. And he introduced me to the trainer of the program he attended, and the trainer ended up being a partner at my current firm. And he said, we had a good conversation about effective training techniques. And at the end, he's like, "Hey, Robert, are you interested in potentially joining our firm? We're, looking for a consultant." And at first I told him no because I was doing well in my job. But I was like, "Why don't you just come in? We'll just have a conversation." And so we ended up just talking, and he said, "Well, just interview. You could always say no." And then I was like, "All right, yeah, let's see where it goes." And this is kind of where it ended up.
Wow. See, uh, Robert, all of the works that you do before up until this point is not connected, right? You first started as a trader, and then you go into China for
Yeah.
working in the factories, a different field, require different techniques and stuff. And then you went back working for the healthcare company, right? Health insurance
Yeah,
company,
yeah.
yeah. And then now you work for, you partner with your friend in the company that doing training and talent development. So there's a lot of different space in there. How can you help yourself to build the skills that can help you to successful in each of the works that you do been doing?
Yeah. So I would say a lot of hard work. I
Works
think
absolutely.
one thing that I guess I'm not shy about is to put in kind of time and effort to learn whatever craft, right? In trading, right? It's kind of a completely different skill set. When I was in China, a lot of it is kind of just learning very quickly. And I think that's also one thing that I've either come to learn how to do or was maybe a bit of an aptitude that I already possessed, was to be able to pick things up very quickly, kind of
Mm,
to understand how things work. And I think the other piece, especially in my work now, is that a lot of the skills that I use now, I was actually cultivating in those previous jobs
mm,
just because I was already kind of gravitating towards that type of activity. And I
mm,
even think back to when I was doing research, and a lot of my time, even though I was doing like science research on material science and plastics, I would spend a lot of time trying to explain things to like new students or to different visiting professors that would come and work at the lab. And I think that skill of synthesizing something kind of complex for someone else was something I was honing for a while in my
mm,
career, and it ended up being extremely useful. I would also say, the other experiences around the kind of scientific thinking, I think also help maybe for me to differentiate between other people who may be in my role now. Like not a lot of people have a science background, right, or like a international business background. So in some ways, it also helped me having kind of very different backgrounds. But I would say a lot of it was just really learning
mm.
from the people who did it well, spending time with them, doing like a lot of doing and getting feedback. I think being very open to feedback really helped accelerate a lot of my growth.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that, Robert. I would tell Vivian, my wife, that because we always had the same sharing. I told her that I'm coming from the business world, so understanding science and learning science is something that is hard for me. It's extremely hard for me. She came from the background at science. And so for her to acquire a business language and learning about that is gonna be a lot easier. So I told her 15 years ago, so one day you're gonna be so excelled, you're gonna pass me, and then you're gonna, I'm gonna look up into you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a partnership. It's a partnership, right?
Uh,
But I will say one thing I do believe, and hopefully, your listeners will find this helpful, is I do think we all possess some strength
mhm.
that if we can just cultivate can really help us better contribute to the world. And I do think those pieces are important is to find your strength, but at the same time, find the overlap to how you can use that strength to somehow, right, add value to society.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of in all of us.
Yep.
And the work is to figure out what that is, to develop it, and then to make sure you're using it to contribute and to be of service.
And that is what I'm gonna bring you to the next point is when you read the book Pathfinders, right? So that was back in 2010, 2011, is it? Was it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
about yeah, around like
Yeah.
2010, yeah,
I bet that you read a
2010,
lot of
2011.
books in your life, right? And then why did that book resonate to you back then? What happened?
Well, I'll tell you, I've never read a book like that
Ah.
where it was like career related. Like, I used to read both fiction, nonfiction, business books, a lot of books on trading and, lean manufacturing, like whatever field I was in, I would try to read a lot kind of in that field, along with, just some of the classics. But I
Mm,
never really read a lot of like self-help books, career books. Like for whatever reason,
mm,
I never maybe knew about them. People never recommended,
mm,
right, those books. And I'll tell you, when I first read The Pathfinder, and usually when people ask me for recommendations, especially if they're trying to figure out what they want to do, I actually don't recommend The Pathfinder as much as I recommend What Color Is Your Parachute
mm,
by Dick Bowles.
mm.
Because What Color Is Your Parachute, I got to the same endpoint, but it was a much like easier read.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to kind of figure out what their career journey might be, or what they're meant to do, I would say read What Color Is Your Parachute. Pathfinder was a little bit more academic. Both okay reads, but if you have to read one, read the one that you're probably going to finish. But I would say that when I read it, I was actually very skeptical about it,
Mm.
because in my mind, I was like, well, if this works, why doesn't everyone do it? Because
Ah.
what they were recommending, no one was really like recommending. None of my friends were like thinking about what they were good at, and picking the job. Everyone was doing what I was doing,
Mm,
right? Which is, hey, what's making money? What has good status? And let's get that job.
mm,
And I will tell you that, in the beginning, it was a bit of an experiment. I didn't know if I would listen to this and have a really bad career, because I deviated, right, so
mm,
much from my previous experiences.
mm,
But really, now that I'm probably a decade plus into it, I am a firm believer that doing that was probably the best thing I could have done for my career, for my life, is to plug into the thing I'm kind of meant to do.
mm.
So it's one of these things. I don't know how I stumbled upon it beyond I was just looking. And one thing I'll tell you, I think a lot about Ha is there could have been a chance that I would have never read that book,
Mm,
and I would not have the career that I have today. So
mm,
I actually feel a strong pull to bring this message to others, quite often, because I felt like if I didn't read that book,
mm,
my career may be like any other average career, right?
mm,
In terms of just doing what everyone else is doing.
mm.
So at least I feel like I was able to step out of just doing what everyone else is doing.
Robert, I'm a big believer of the law of attractions. So, you attract things to your life, right? So the book came to
Mm-hmm.
you back then was a response to maybe something that you've been longing for a while. But it's, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us longing for something, but because of the success in what we have been doing or the path that we're doing too comfortably for us to make a change. So we don't,
Yes.
so we reject the idea. Like you say earlier, you were skeptical about that, and then you allow yourself to be losing yourself a little bit to try a little, and years later you're now a true believer of that. And
Yeah.
I want to talk about it a little bit, all right? Because a lot of us
Sure.
reading and we let our reading or knowing, but we let our skeptical part of our mind, our thinking, stop
Yeah.
us from the trying, all right? And then back then
That's so
you
true.
were successful at every role that you did, and then so the skeptical part of your thinking was very normal. So where did you how did you give yourself the curiosity to continue reading and the strength to try it out? And yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say maybe it was the timing that I was in a place that I could try out something new, and maybe like you said, I was open, right,
Mm,
to
mm,
figure out because I really felt like, all right, I could probably do anything. So
mm,
even it was like the practical nature of what job should I even apply for? Like I
yeah.
don't even know, right? Like because there was everything seemed like a possibility. So this was a kind of a way to narrow it down. And not, I don't know, I'm trying to reflect on did I have to make a push to take that path? And I would say, I think in some ways I was not really scared to do something that I didn't do before, right? Like I
Mm,
left science research to do equities trading, something I've never done before, right? I left
mm,
equities trading to work and live in China, something I've never done before. So I do feel like there is a bit of me that's more risk seeking in that
right.
way, or maybe a strong belief that I can figure it out. And maybe because I've had to, right, do it in those settings that allowed me to kind of make this additional leap. I think the big difference between those leaps and this one was done after some thoughtful reflection of
Mm,
who I am and what I wanted.
mm,
Whereas the other ones were really just kind of hopping to what was like popular or what I thought was a good thing to do,
mm,
but never really thinking about myself to be more purposeful.
mm,
And so there's a long winded way of saying I believe I always had this ability to perhaps just do something that's quite different. But I think the big difference maker was taking that time to think about directionally where should I be going
mm,
and using kind of my internal compass a bit more
mm.
to decide that. And I will tell you, even along the journey, especially early on, there were definitely times, and this probably comes back to a bit of what you were talking about, Ha, that I wasn't sure if I made the right choice,
Ah,
right? Because I was making a lot less money than I was used to. I was good at what I was doing. So I think that kind of kept it going. So I do feel like in some ways you kind of know if you
mm,
feel like you're doing something that you're meant to do,
mm,
even though sometimes the external scoreboard
mm.
may not reflect that, right?
Ah,
And we, our external scoreboard usually will be like our compensation or what might look good on a resume.
mm,
But internally, you do feel like, you know what, I'm like, this is a thing that I really enjoy. Like, I don't know if you've interviewed Marcus Buckingham, but he recently came out with a book and he writes a lot about, talent and kind of love for work. I believe he was at ADP, he did like strengths finders, right?
mm,
He's kind of one of the folks that did that. And he has a new book, Love Plus Work. And I think he talks a lot about how strengths are things that energizes you.
mm,
And I do think it's not just the things you're good at, but it's
mm.
the thing that when you do it, you feel like energized by. Kind of like by you doing these
Yeah.
podcasts, right? Like it kind of energizes you as opposed to drains you. And I think there's some truth to that. So
Mm,
for your listeners, if you really think of, throughout a week or throughout even a day, which meetings or which activities really energize you,
mm.
I would say pay attention to that. And then which really drain you. Like you come out, you're like, oh, I'm so tired. That's likely maybe not your strength.
Mm.
And so that I think also helps me stay the course a bit.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I definitely will connect with Marcus and ask him
Yeah,
about the works that he do. I never interviewed him, so but he's I think he's in on my LinkedIn connections. Uh, now
great.
now go back to the point that you're saying. Earlier you were saying that before you make the leap of change, right? There were you let your life live in a lot of external factors, like the people
Yeah,
advices, and things like that. And a lot of people live like that and not be able to make the change just because they cannot make the move out of the external factors like that. So given the fact that you also a risk taker, there's a lot of people in your life will stop you in take Robert, it's crazy to do that. Why you doing this, why you doing that and stuff. How
yeah,
how can you give yourself that strength? Where did you find the strength to pass all of that and like blockage, let's say good blockage, because they might have good intention for you, to give the advices
yeah.
and then follow your dream.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like it could easily go the opposite way if
Ah,
I'm really hard-headed about something.
mm,
I do think, I've had always a very supportive spouse, my wife Amy, and she was my girlfriend for a long time before then.
mm,
And she's always supported me, right? No matter like, all these crazy things I wanted to do. And I think that's a big part of it, right? The person that's closest to me was supportive of me.
mm,
I think if she wasn't, it would probably be more difficult. I think the other side, and I'm trying to reflect if this happened when I read that book or maybe a little bit later, but I did come to start believing this idea of a personal mission. Like I have a personal mission in life. And for me, I believe my mission is to help other people reach their full potential,
mm,
right? And I always think about, okay, what is the platform I'm going to do that, right? Right now, at this point in time, my platform is to teach them skills, right?
mm,
Professional skills to help them reach their potential, right? I wrote the book, right? Excelling Your Expertise,
yep,
because I feel like there are all of these technical people who their potential isn't realized because they don't know how to sell their ideas, right? And I wrote that book. And I think once I kind of had that personal mission, it made it easier for me to make those decisions. And I think it also overlapped with this idea of taking responsibility for my life
ah,
because I think it's so easy to blame someone else if something doesn't work out if you took their advice, right? And you're like, oh well, you told me to do that and it didn't work out. Like you, not my fault, right? It's your fault. And I think some point in time I decided, you know what, this is kind of my mission in life.
mm,
I'm going to do it, even if like it doesn't work out. At least it's kind of my responsibility. So I think that helped to give me the strength. I do think I'm trying to think of what might be useful for your listeners, right? Those who might be on the fence. Um, I think really thinking about like what do you want, your life to be, and having that mission, I think can give people strength because they know, you know what, I'm doing this, I'm choosing this road,
mm,
and I think also to know that like any road, you could walk down and change your path.
mm,
But the key thing is to be the one that chooses the path.
mm,
So I think making sure you're not giving up your choice to anyone else, right? Because
mm,
it's your life. So you
yep,
don't want that choice to be made by someone else. And
mm,
I think, coming from a traditional Chinese family, it's very easy for the parents to make that choice
yeah,
for you. And so I do think it's important, or society, to make
mm,
that choice for you. Like, oh, you should do this because that's what people of your age do or your education do.
mm,
And I think it's beginning to trust yourself more.
mm,
Um, and then I think what you'll find is it becomes easier
uh-huh.
as you go.
Wow. Yesterday, my wife and I interviewed. a very high rank officer in the U.S. Army, and then he
Oh,
was saying about the word intention. So living intentional. So basically, you have to
yeah.
declare that, your intention to do this, intention to do that, and make a commitment to that. So if it works out, it's not work out, it's because coming from you, and then you own it to yourself. So it's very important. Like you said, be
That's
responsible for that.
right.
Yeah. And you mentioned, a little bit ahead of the conversation, and we want to get
Sure.
into the book that you wrote and introduced to the
Hmm.
market this year, right? I want to congratulate you for that.
Oh,
I want to
thank you.
congratulate you for another thing also. A lot of my friends are executives, and by the time they retire, there's two things that I normally heard them sharing about their regrets. The first is that they could have, start their own company when they were younger, and they did not. They yet doing that. Okay. The second was, like, they always think that they can write a good book, and they're yet writing one. So I always told them it's never late to do, to start your consulting firm, whatever the business that you love
Yeah.
doing, and it's never too late for you to write a book and to leave your legacy behind. So you do both.
Yeah.
All right. I want to
Yeah.
congratulate you
Yeah.
for that. Tell
Well,
us about the
yeah.
book. Tell us, how did you end up, and the journey that makes you to decide Robert wants to write that book selling your expertise.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. And it kind of came back to that kind of mission I talked about. But just to clarify, I joined, my firm, and I'm a partner now. So I'm
Uh-huh.
a, owner of the firm, but I didn't start this firm.
Yeah.
So, but I did write this book. So I would say, this book, I had this idea for probably a good 5, 6 years, right, ago, even though I really spent like the last 2 years writing it and getting it to production. And the idea came really just in kind of our work with our clients. Often, well, we do a ton of work in professional services, like with consultants,
Mm.
and often we will see, right, this gap between those who are doing the technical work and their
Mm.
ability to move up is dependent on their ability to generate revenue. But
Mm.
the locus of activities from when you are just executing on the work to when you need to bring in business
Mm.
is so different that a lot of people, I think, end up leaving, right, the professional services world because they just didn't want to do it
Mm.
or didn't know how to do it well. And
Mm.
so then when they tried, they weren't getting the results they wanted. And we saw this in bankers, right? In lawyers, accountants, right? Anyone that has some kind of knowledge
Mm.
element, even if you're internal, same thing. Right? You
Yep.
don't get your ideas, then you don't get budget, then you don't have impact. And so we would coach them all the time, and we
Mm.
would recommend like a number of different resources because there are a lot of sales books out there, right?
Mm.
Like
Mm.
an infinite amount, I feel like, right? But then not all of them address like all of the issues that I felt was prevalent in professional services.
Mm.
And not a lot of it addressed what I thought was probably one of the biggest pieces is the mindset
Mm.
around kind of selling and a
Ah.
distaste for selling. I
Mm.
think most of the challenges is not actually learning how to sell. I think most people don't want to sell.
Mm.
And so part of why I wrote this book really had two main goals, right? First goal is to really get people to see that selling is probably one of the most important things you could do,
Mm.
right? For any idea you have that you want to bring to life.
Mm.
And two, it's not just about schmoozing. There's a very concrete framework, right, to sell business. As you know, right, you have your own consultancy. And then how do you do it so that it's a skill that you're learning and it's a learnable skill, not just based on aptitude? Because I think what ends up happening is that there are probably a lot of people that could be even more successful
Mm.
if I feel that they have the ideas from this book, but right now they'll choose to opt out,
Mm.
or they'll go in house or they'll leave their profession.
Mm.
And I just want those people to have a good chance, right, to really have meaningful careers. And that's really what drove me to write the book. And I'll tell you how you talked about like doubt throughout writing this book. So many times I was thinking, oh, Robert, who are you to write this book? Right? Like what? Like, who do you think you are, right, to write this book? And I'll tell you the one thing that really helped me was really just thinking about the people that I think would benefit, right? I've seen people, right, benefit from this
Mm.
advice. I've seen people benefit from the framework in the book.
Mm.
So then it's just creating a resource so that other people can have access to it.
Mm.
But it's very easy for us to tell ourselves that like we don't have permission to do something like this.
Mm.
And I think that often can stop people. And if my advice there is always think about like, who are you helping? And
Mm.
if you can take the focus off yourself and focus it on the people that you're writing this book for or
Mm.
starting this business for,
Mm.
I think that might help you be more brave.
Mm.
So that could be something that hopefully those listening can find helpful.
Absolutely. So see, the way that you write the book, selling your expertise, is also the way to help you to overcome that, and like that mindset of like, who am I to write this kind of book, right? So now you're also selling your expertise to the many, so that they can help themselves to sell the expertise to, and to the people around them, and
Yeah, it's kind of proves itself out a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
and to me, in here the words expertise, and also because we all have ideas. So you said that mindset is a thing that will stop us from bring our ideas to the people. And then I want to ask in the reverse way a little bit, because the word expertise also is very very
Mm,
very big words, like a lot of time, we're afraid to put our title like expert or something like that, because there's so
of
many people out
course.
there is really really good at, and that is stopping us from self-claiming, hey, I'm expert in this field or that field, right? So
Yeah.
if we want to master the craft to become an expert, and so that we can sell our expertise out there, what would the people do to make it happen also, Robert?
Yeah, so I would say one, there's a really good book. I reference it in my book, Expert by Roger Kneebone, and he really talks about like this practice of becoming an expert. But I
Mm,
would say it is true, right? Like what defines an expert, right?
mm,
Is it like an academic credential, like a PhD? Is it 40 years of work experience? All of which, right, gives something to someone. I
mm,
think probably the focus is less on getting the label of
mm,
expert and really thinking about, well, what does expertise really do,
mm,
right? And I talk, in the book that instead of thinking of yourself as selling, think of it as serving someone else,
mm,
because your expertise is only valuable if it can help someone.
mm.
So if you have some knowledge that can help someone, forget what you're called,
Ah,
get them this knowledge.
mm,
And a big part of selling that expertise is to give them this knowledge when it's helpful to them and when they need it.
mm,
So, sometimes it's less, I think, about amassing a status,
mm,
because there's so many experts who are wrong on like a
mm.
ton of things, right? Like how can you be an expert on something that's never happened before, right? Think of
Uh-huh.
how fast our world is changing.
Yep.
But what I think can be helpful for people who are thinking of, well, do I have the permission to share something, right? Because
Mm,
there's someone else, they know so much more, they should listen to them.
mm,
It's true, right? If there are better, right, you haven't really thought through it, then you want to be careful, right, what advice you're giving. But
mm,
I do think if you know what your approach works, right? Like you have a consulting company, right? Huh?
mm,
And you have an approach that works, right? Based on work you've done with clients, based on kind of your own experience, then you're just like any other teacher, right? You're taking something that works and teaching it to others.
yep.
And I think that might be helpful to help people not get hung up on amassing a certain title in
Mm.
order to help others.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing that. So we have to shift the mindset from, like seeing ourselves expert, but seeing ourselves as a server, and then helping people to, share through sharing our ideas to help them to do the job better. That's it, right?
Exactly. Like, does your thing work?
Uh-huh.
Because, as a consultant, what's nice about being a consultant, I'll tell you, and I would love to get your perspective on this, is you have to stay sharp.
Yep.
Because if your thing doesn't work, no one will hire you. You have
Yep.
no business, right? So part of like your own responsibility is to be good at what you do right? And you'll put in work to do that.
Mm.
And people will continue to engage you if they feel like you're actually helping them and getting the results that they're looking to get.
Yep.
And so that would be the way to know whether or not you are maybe expert is, do people come back to you, right? Time and time and again. And if they do, you have something that people find valuable,
Yep.
especially if they're paying you for it, right? That's the ultimate signal of values. They're willing to pay you for the thing you can deliver, and you have to deliver it better than someone else, or else
Absolutely.
they'll pay someone else, right, to do it.
Yes, and it all go back to the intent, and the word intention. You have to have the intention to make yourself be sharp in that area, so that you have the right intention to help your clients to get better at what they do. So everything I think is boiled down to the intention that we're giving to
Yeah,
ourselves and to the people that we serve, right? Robert, I have
that's right.
two last questions for you for a beautiful
Sure.
conversation today. All right.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And the first one um, is about thinking. So my wife and I are in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that our ability to think these days is not increasing but diminishing. All right. So every
Mm,
chance that we talk to a good thinker, the one that out there helping people to grow, we will ask this question: Robert, how do you help yourself to expand your ability to think?
mhm. I think for me, and I don't know if I'm a good thinker, so you'll have to discount this for whatever it's worth. But I will say, pretty much with anything, you get better by doing it. And I
Mm,
think when it comes to thinking, you actually have to think,
mm,
right? Like kind of if you want to get better at writing, you have to write. I
mm,
think if you want to get better at thinking, you have to think about what you're thinking
mm,
and why you think that way,
mm,
because it's so easy to just use shortcuts,
mm,
right, and just make connections based on your previous assumptions and what you believe to be true. And I think what I try to do, and I read a lot, so
mm,
I feel like I'm constantly being bombarded by stuff,
mm.
is I ask myself, like, why should I believe this person?
Ah,
Like, what is it that, whether it's my own experience, whether it's what they're saying, whether it's the arguments they're using, it's like, why should I believe it? And maybe that's, from my training as a scientist, or my training in business. But I think that's helped me to distill kind of what works and what doesn't. And I think the other part of it is, for me, anything that's replicable
mm,
is also something that I believe to be more true.
mm.
So any idea that I hear or read, I will try to use it. And if
Ah,
it's something that gets consistent results, then I believe that idea more. So
mm.
I don't know if that was kind of the angle that you were thinking about when it comes to thinking, but I would love to, just because you're speaking to so many people
Ah.
about this, what have you heard as some of the key things to really be a better thinker?
Mm. Thanks for asking that. We've been interviewing a lot of people on the topic of thinking, right? And there's a few things that we
Yeah,
put it onto uh, the thinking acronym. So like the T stand for time. You have to put time out of your schedule
yeah.
on a daily basis to think, and then the H there is the is a head and a heart. So you have to try to think by your head, but
Mm,
also let your heart lead the way. And the I is like imagination. You have to imagine the future and using your connecting the dot back to the past and try to create the link between the two, and use various information from out there so that you can put it onto your and the topic that you're thinking, so to make it more resourceful and a lot more
mm-hmm.
meaningful. So the N is for networking. So a lot of our speakers said that if we spend time in the connecting with the people out of our professions, that also
Yes,
help us
it
to
is very
sharpen
true.
our ability to think. And the case for knowledge, like you're saying, read a lot so that we can absorb more information in, and then we can also, through the reading, it's also help us to eliminate the things that we've been having. So the relearning, the unlearning process takes place through the reading also,
Yeah.
right? And then it's okay. It's the I is intentional, so it's like you have to, like you say, you have to get better at thinking through, put yourself into the thinking behavior. So you have to, have the intentional to ask yourself the question, why is that you think, and then this way, and what else can you think in differently, and where else
Yeah.
can you get into, you know, and the end is the nourishment is like it's like you, you cannot think if your body is not well, right? So
Mhm.
if you're sick, if you're not and then if you engage yourself with in the environment that not fostering you the room for thinking, you're not going to be able to create a good thinking capability.
Yeah.
And the last one is the very surprise factor that I got a lot of answers from, is the G, is a generosity.
Yeah.
And then because a lot of us think of our ideas like so like just for ourselves, and then there's no new things under the sun, right? So if we can share our ideas
No.
and get the people to jumping in and collect, collaboratively, our ideas can grow to the next level. So if we can be generous of the sharings of how we think and the ideas that we're
Yeah.
working on, then we're gonna get a lot more back that help our ability to think to get a lot better. So generosity is the one thing that came out very surprised for us. So those are the whole word thinking, we've been
Oh
carrying around.
wow.
And my wife and I
I wish
actually,
I. Yeah.
Vivian and I are working on writing a book about that also to features the
Fantastic.
stories and stuff. So
Well, I'll tell you, I wish I just asked you because that was such a much better answer. But I will tell you one thing though,
yes, please.
writing the book really helped me think about the topic of business development more deeply
Yep.
than what I thought I knew going in.
Yep.
And I do think the act of writing a book is a really good way to sharpen your thinking. And I'm sure you'll find this in this experience as well, because you have to keep things together,
Mm.
but at the same time, you have to really consider what do people know and not know,
Yep.
and how do you make decisions about it. And so that's fantastic. And it sounds like you and Vivian will write this book together.
Yep. So that's our first book together.
That's
So
great.
it took me years to invite her to the journey, and now she's joining to writing that. I'm excited about the journey next that we're taking. So which leads me to the last question of our conversation today. So we know your
Sure.
past, we know your present, the work that you do, and we congratulate you for all the amazing things that you've been accomplishing.
Oh,
And now
thank you.
we are heading into the future. Okay.
Hmm.
Is there anything Robert is working on that exciting that you want to share with us now so we can celebrate with you together?
Oh, well, that's such a nice question, huh? I would say, right now, since the book just released, I have a lot of focus on the book, the ideas, getting those ideas out there. But similar to, I think, the mission I mentioned to you, I do think in the future, I would love to help the younger generations, even those kind of still in junior high school, kind of figure out their path, right, and equip them with the right skills.
Mm.
So it's something that maybe distant future, but I do think that's something that would be important so that um, it's not left up to chance whether or not, right, someone decides to take that road of self-discovery. So I can see that as potentially something that I may tackle in the future. Also, because I think we're moving towards, uh, I think, more distance, and I
Mm.
want to be able to bring kind of people together more, right, as
Mm.
a community,
Wow.
just because I think technology is taking us away, and
Mm.
teach them how to think. So
Mm.
when that book comes out, that might be part of that curriculum. So
Well, Robert, thanks for the amazing conversation today. Thanks for uh, the chance to knowing you and connecting, and uh,
likewise,
and thanks for all of the amazing thing that you've been doing. Is a great source of motivation for me and many people out there to continue doing our works to build the world in a better way in our way. So so thanks a
yeah.
lot.
Well, I'm in awe in terms of your ability to get so many interviews done in such a short time. And yeah, I'm not surprised. I think you have such a great attitude and positivity that kind of lends itself well. So, I really look forward to staying in touch and seeing what you and Vivian come up with and meeting Vivian as well.
Yep.
So
Say hello to Amy and your children first, okay? I look
I
forward to
will.
meeting you next year. And if you ever travel here earlier, then you let us know. Now you have a new friends, a new family here waiting for you. Okay?
Oh, thank you so much. All right. Take
Thank
care, huh?
you. Take care, Robert. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye bye.